In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever." And then he got really awkward and he was like, "Okay, gotta go, bye." And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open. And it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her.
Story time. So just when I thought dating couldn't get any worse, surprise, it did. I went on this date. It was like a FaceTime date the other night with this guy, and it was going okay at first. It was a little bit awkward, but it was fine. Pretty soon into the date, he asked me what my type was. And I said, well, I don't really have a type. Like, all my exes are pretty different, which is true. And then I asked him what his type was. He looked me straight in the eyes and said to me, well, normally I go for really strong, motivated, and independent women, but they're all pretty heartless. So I'm trying something different. Excuse me, bitch?
So anyway, she comes up to me and shoves the phone in my face and goes, "Who the fuck is this?" And I literally looked at her and started laughing my ass off. And she was like, "What the fuck is so funny, Kaylee? Blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Go ahead, hold on the name." And she held on the name and realized it wasn't her fucking boyfriend. So I packed up my things while she literally went and sat on her bed and started crying. She was like, "I don't want to lose my best friend." So fast forward, her and her boyfriend broke up. Her and I weren't friends anymore. And then she would always try to accuse me of getting with him. Moral of the story, don't get involved in other people's relationships. Bye, guys. Toxic best friend story time. So I had an off and on friendship with this one girl. In my freshman year, we became friends again. And she had this boyfriend named Nicholas. And they literally fought 24/7. And every time she would fight, she would be like, "Can you please fix this for me?" So she would have me add him on Snapchat, fix it, and then block him. And guys, this literally was happening like 5 times a week. And then after she asked me to do that the first few times, I realized she started going through my phone. And when I say my phone, I mean my whole motherfucking phone. A bitch was going through my Snapchats, DMs, text messages, and I didn't know how to confront her because that's just weird. So the one day I was getting ready at her house because we were about to go out, and she was like, "I'm grounded, can I use your phone real quick?" And I was like, "Yeah, just let me Snapchat this last person back." And she goes, "No," and rips the phone out of my hand. And she starts going through my Snapchat right in front of me. And I had a streak with this kid named Nick. She goes up to me and says, "What the fuck is this?" Like for part 2.
Just found out I leaked my own nudes. Story time. So about a month ago, my manager came over and she took me to the side and she was like, "I don't want to alarm you, but I've dealt with it. There was a man threatening to leak indecent images of you if you don't send him more." Huh? She said, "Yeah. He has pictures of your jubblies." Excuse me, I have the chest of a 12-year-old boy. There is nothing to capture. It's just bone. I don't take pictures of that. Ever. Like, I'd understand if I had double D's, but baby, I've got minus A's. So I said, "Thank you for dealing with a cheeky bit of blackmail in my business email, but he's lying. Let's move forward." So I forgot about it. And then today, I'm uploading a YouTube video, and I haven't checked my channel in ages. What do I see when I check it? Ads limited due to nudity on one of my vlogs. Which vlog is it, you might ask?
I'll vlog getting my nips pierced.
I need to take a class on how to blur correctly. My itty bitty titty committees on the internet. If you're about to check, please subscribe. And also, I'm sorry in advance. If yours are small, it might make you feel better.
Okay, story time. So I work at a jewelry store, and today a man came in looking for a gift for his wife for their 10th year anniversary. He ended up picking out a piece that said, "My beautiful wife." And I said, "Anything else for you today?" And he said, "No, that's it for her, but I do want to make another purchase using a separate credit card. And could you possibly create a different account for me?" And I said, "Sure, what are you looking for?" And he said, "Do you have anything that says girlfriend?" And I said, yes. And he said, perfect, I'll take it. And do you have anything that says happy 1-year anniversary to go with it? And I said, yes. And he said, perfect, I'll take it. So I boxed everything up all nice and I put them in their respected bags. He had me mark a K for Kristen on the bottom of his wife's bag and an L for Laura on the bottom of his girlfriend's bag. I put pretty bows on them. I handed it to him. I said, they're gonna love it. Have a nice day. And he said, thank you. And shit, I just remembered that his wife's name is Laura and his girlfriend's name is Kristen. I must have mixed up the bags. Oops.
Story time! So yesterday my friends and I all went to the fair and there were 6 of us in total. And none of us wanted to have to worry about driving there and parking, so we just Ubered instead. So we left the fair around 11:15 and we walked to a nearby shopping center where the Uber picked us up about 10 minutes late. We ended up leaving at 11:30. We get in the Uber, the man says hello, and we head home the normal way. Everything's fine. And my parents don't like when I Uber, so they were tracking me on Life 360 from the moment I got in the car. After about 10 minutes in, I get a text from my mom, and it said, "Where are you?" I look up from my phone and I realize I have no idea where we are, and Ubers know their directions, they know how to take you home. We were 20 minutes out of the way. So I'm terrified. My mom's texting me nonstop, literally about to call the police. I'm gonna run out of time, but posting part 2 today.
This is one of the biggest lies I ever told to get myself out of trouble. So back in high school, I used to run on the cross country team, but by no means was I competitive or athletic at all. I was honestly just there for the social aspect of it. All throughout my freshman year of high school, I would literally run to Cold Stone Creamery to get ice cream and bring it back to everyone on my bus. I don't know if that tells you what kind of athlete I was, but yeah. Somehow I still didn't get caught for doing this stuff, and by later in high school, my friends and I decided to pretty much never go. I mean, we would show up to practice, but we would wait until everyone was ahead of us and then turn the opposite direction and sprint to Starbucks. We literally did this almost every single day. And then we would call cute boys from other schools to come meet us over there. We would literally get coffee with them, go shopping, and then once we saw the team getting close again, we would just run back to school and pretend like we did the workout. Until one day, I was called down to the principals. They said it had to do with my cross-country attendance. Follow, share, and I'll tell you what happened next.
Let this be a reminder that there really are monsters out there. In 2007, a woman living right near a prison in California got home late one night and went right to bed. Around midnight, she woke up to footsteps on her first floor, assumed it was her roommate, so she goes downstairs to say hi. She yells out to her roommate, who doesn't say anything, and then in walks this giant man who she doesn't recognize. She runs upstairs, jumps in her closet into the crawl space and hides. As she's helplessly tucked away in this little crawl space, trying not to make any sound, all she hears is this giant man sprinting around her house, running into walls, flipping furniture and screaming in frustration because he can't find her. Finally, after several hours, she slowly opens the crawl space back up, crawls out and gets her phone off the nightstand and calls police. As she's telling the police her story, she describes the person who had broken in, and they stop her and say, "Ma'am, go back in the crawl space and stay there. We'll be there as soon as we can." It turned out a 6'11" convicted murderer had escaped the prison and was still on the loose. This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated, and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years. Unless you've heard this story, there's no way you could have guessed what was on that ship. In 2012, an old Russian cruise liner was being towed to the Caribbean to be used for scrap when the tow line snapped. They tried to recover it, but it drifted into international waters and everybody just kind of assumed it would sink, so they said, forget about it. It didn't sink, because a year later they got a GPS signal from the unmanned ship showing that it had drifted nearly 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic and was now poised to strike the British coastline. At first, British authorities were not concerned with the damage this ship might cause to their coastline until scientists revealed what was on the ship.
It was being towed to the Caribbean last year when it came loose during a storm. It's now feared to be infested with cannibal rats on board, who, lacking a food source, have turned on each other.
Cannibal rats? That's pretty shocking. But not nearly as shocking as it was for me to see 4 million on my page. Thank you. Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector. Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector.
This is a crazy story time of when I used to work at Tilly's, so buckle up. This middle-aged mom walks in the store, right? And she just starts walking around the men's section and literally just grabbing everything she sees. I mean, she's not even looking at the sizes. So we thought that was weird, so we went up and asked her if she needs any help, and of course she said no. Then she decides that she wants to try everything on. So I unlocked a room for her, and then I told her that she can only have 7 at a time, and she literally had a million things, and she just ran in, shut the door, and cut me off. So we started to get suspicious, so I started talking over my little headset thingy and telling the people around the store what's going on. We knocked on the door like 3 times asking if she needed help or needed any other sizes, and of course she just said no again. Then she comes barging out and literally runs to the front door and just leaves. So I walk in to see, and there's literally a bloody tampon on the floor. 2 days later, she comes back to the store. This is a crazy story time of when I used to work at Tilly's, so buckle up. This middle-aged mom walks in the store, right? And she just starts walking around the men's section and literally just grabbing everything she sees. I mean, she's not even looking at the sizes. So we thought that was weird, so we went up and asked her if she needs any help, and of course she said no. Then she decides that she wants to try everything on. So I unlocked a room for her, and then I told her that she can only have 7 at a time, and she literally had a million things, and she just ran in, shut the door, and cut me off. So we started to get suspicious, so I started talking over my little headset thingy and telling the people around the store what's going on. We knocked on the door like 3 times asking if she needed help or needed any other sizes, and of course she just said no again. Then she comes barging out and literally runs to the front door and just leaves. So I walk in to see, and there's literally a bloody tampon on the floor. 2 days later, she comes back to the store.
Okay, so I was pulling up to Board and Brew, where I go to lunch like every day. And this little garden guy, like I was turning in and I didn't want to hit him, so I smiled at him, and he like stops me, and he's like,
what is your name? And I was like, Safia. And he's like, Sofia, like, whatever. And he's Spanish. And he was like, muy bonita. Like, and he was just calling me gorgeous. And I was like, ah! And he like, ah! Like, I'm kind of scared, but like, ah! He's like, I come here every Monday. I see you. And I'm like, oh, okay.
This is why you should never stay in sketchy motels. In 2005, a young woman on a solo road trip across the country decided to stop for the night. The first place she sees is the Mountaintop Motel. It looked pretty cheap, but she was tired, so she said good enough. The check-in guy eyed her up and down very uncomfortably and then asked her if she was traveling alone. She ignores the question, pays for her room, and then walks away with the key. When she gets inside her room and sees there are literally cockroaches in her bed, she says nope and decides to sleep in her car in the parking lot. Around 3 a.m., she wakes up to see the check-in guy using his own keys to get into the motel room she was supposed to be in. A few minutes later, he storms out and slams the door and starts walking towards her car. Terrified, she hides under her blanket as the man tries to open her car doors but can't and walks away. She speeds off and calls her friend and asks her to look up the address of Mountaintop Motel so she can give it to police. Her friend's quiet for a second and then just says, "The Mountaintop Motel closed a week ago."
So in 8th grade, we had our final for PE. Basically, we had to run like 7 laps in 20 minutes, whatever. So long story short, everyone starts running, you know, moving their legs so fast. And then people start finishing. I was like, oh my God, ew. So at this point, it's like 45 minutes. The whole class is done except me. And everyone's just watching me run. Like, we had this one kid named Pedro, who each time I did a lap, he'd be like, finally. Like, thank you, Pedro. Thank you. So then the teacher stops me and he's like, you're so slow. And then the teacher is like, you're not gonna graduate because
Story time. So just when I thought dating couldn't get any worse, surprise, it did. I went on this date. It was like a FaceTime date the other night with this guy, and it was going okay at first. It was a little bit awkward, but it was fine. Pretty soon into the date, he asked me what my type was. And I said, well, I don't really have a type. Like, you know, all my exes are pretty different, which is true. And then I asked him what his type was. He looked me straight in the eyes and said to me, well, normally I go for really strong, motivated, and independent women, but they're all pretty heartless. So I'm trying something different. Excuse me, bitch?
Okay, so when I was in 5th grade, this kid that sat next to me told me to make a Google Doc and add him and my other friend onto it. So I did it, and we were just like chatting the whole time in this Google Doc while we were supposed to be working on our essay. And we slowly started adding more and more people onto it. And this one day, I wasn't at school, and they were still using the group chat. And my mom got an email from the teacher saying that I created a group chat with the whole class and that I was going to be in trouble. So it turns out my friends added the whole entire class onto it. And some of these kids were sending pictures of the teachers into this group chat. And then one of the kids who was in the group chat told on us for starting the group chat. And he actually also got in trouble because he was communicating through the group chat.
Ladies, you want to be in a happy relationship? There's only 4 things you need to do. 1, find a man who'll make you laugh. 2, find a man who's cultured and will explore this world with you. 3, find a guy who's intellectual and ambitious and will support your ambitions. 4, of course, find a guy who's honest, trustworthy, and respectful. But most importantly, more important than any of that, ladies, is that you make sure that these 4 guys don't know each other.
Original story behind Snow White. Keep in mind, in the movie Snow White was 14, in the book she was 7. After everything happens in the movie, when she runs away, the queen sends the huntsman to kill her and get back her heart and her liver. But he kills a boar instead, and the evil queen, thinking it was Snow White's, she cooks it and eats it. And when she finds out that it's not, she sends her traps. A corset that's too tight that the dwarfs save her from. A poisonous comb that the dwarfs save her from. And finally the apple, and that's when she drops dead. Now, thinking she was dead, they put her in the glass coffin. Then the prince comes along, and having never seen her before, he insists on taking her away. keep in mind she is 7 years old. He trips while carrying her, which causes the apple to unlodge from her throat, which makes her wake up, obviously, and then they get married, even though she's 7. And during the ceremony, the evil witch has to wear burning iron shoes and dance until she dies. What makes it more disturbing is that she was 7 years old the entire
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
I was 11 years old when my mom kicked me out of the house for the first time. It was a school day! The sun wasn't even out! So you know what I did? I took a shit in the front yard. And I smeared it on her house with a leaf. Fuck. And then I took my happy ass on the school bus with a fucking trash bag of my belongings and went to school. And I told all of my friends, naturally. I thought this was the best revenge. I thought this was a normal thing that happened between daughters and mothers. I got sent to the guidance counselor. And then a few years later, I found out that my stepdad had to power wash my feces.